Next up, we have a pretty unusual situation for us here on The Late Late Show. It almost never happens because, frankly, if a guest isn't available to come to see us, then that means we won't be talking to them. And it's more than 20 years, in fact, since The Late Late Show left the studio to talk to someone. But when the boss calls, you kind of have to answer. So I recently travelled to London to meet the man behind some of the most iconic music in modern rock. Springsteen.
Hello.
Welcome to The Late Late Show.
It's great to be here.
It's great to see you. You know, there are so many people all over the island of Ireland who are enormous fans of yours. They seem to have this thing with you, and is it fair to say you might have it with them?
Yeah, it's great because, you know, being half Irish,
yes,
it's sort of lovely to go home and get that sort of response. I mean, I was raised by the Irish side of my family.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was a little church with a police rectory and a convent, and then we had 4 houses over here that were filled with all my Irish aunts and uncles and cousins. Then there was a house here where I lived with my grandparents and my parents, and then there was the lone Italian outpost on the other side of the street. But I lived a lot amongst the Irish side of my family, McNicholases and Farrells and O'Hagans. So it's lovely to come to Ireland and see the kind of connection we've made really over the past, I think, decade or so. You know, there was something that happened over the past 10 years that was very, very just unique for us, and it's I love it. It's a wonderful place for me to go.
Religion, was that an issue? Catholicism, that kind of thing?
Oh yeah, that was a big issue.
Yeah, I was thinking it might be. Talk to me about that.
You know, we had serious Catholics on both sides of the family, the Irish and the Italian. I grew up in the shadow of the steeple and of the red brick church. Saw every wedding, every funeral, every baptism. You'd run down to the corner because that was the show. That was a free show. And my mother and I, we'd run down. We'd pick the rice up that was thrown from at one wedding couple.
Yeah.
We'd pick it all up, put it in a bag, bring it back home, and then come back and throw it on complete strangers who came out next from the church. So it was very old school Catholicism, quite superstitious. If there was a thunder and lightning storm, my grandmother would run me down to my Aunt Jane's house. She'd pull all the blinds down so the lightning couldn't get us. We'd sit in the living room and she'd throw holy water over each of us. So it was, you know, catechism class every day, first thing, for 6 years of my life. First thing you learned about was religion, so it was a big, big shaping factor in my young childhood.
Catholicism it's a peculiar thing, horses for courses and everything. Did it help you or haunt you?
Well, it does both, of course, you know, like everything in your life. When I was in the 8th grade, I said, I'm done, I'm finished, no more for me. No church, no more studying. And I figured I was just going to walk away from it clear and clean. But, you know, suddenly I look at my own writing and I see the remnants of scripture in it and remnants of things that I've learned. I see that there's a gospel-like fervor in what we do. I see that I'm writing about redemption and damnation and loss and transcendence. These are all things I'm deeply interested in. And of course, I trace it back eventually, and I realize it all came out of my Catholic upbringing.
It followed you down through the years.
It followed me then, and still to this day. So,
you speak very frankly about your father. A lot of attention about that element of your book as well.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me about your dad a little bit, as from the boy, young Bruce's point of view, as opposed to retrospectively?
T-Bone Burnett, the musician, always said that a big piece of rock and roll is people going, "Daddy, why? What happened? Why?"
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So it's certainly true. It's true in my case.
Okay. What was he like as a dad to a son, young son?
But it was difficult. It was the 50s. I think men were less attuned to their children in those days. And as a child, you were, your parents were godlike to you.
Sure.
So any small word or gesture meant a great deal. My father and I were really raised by the same woman for the first 6 years of our life. I lived with my grandparents, and so his mother really kind of usurped my mother's role and she became my primary mother. And so it was very unusual in that we had that in common, and yet we also had all the difficulties that came from that in common. And
was it competitive?
It was competitive. It became competitive, and my pop didn't quite know how to contextualize that or what to do about it, and so it became very painful for the two of us, and it was something we had to work. I worked very hard and long on sorting through, and but it was fraught with a lot of tension and a lot of confusion. And
between the jigs and reels of that tension and confusion, do you think there was love there?
Oh, of course. I mean, at the end of the day, when my pop, particularly when he got older, and he softened up quite a bit. But my father was was struck by a lot of mental illness, and so that doubled up on all the confusion and the difficulty. Sort of ran through our family, and it affected him very deeply. So when I look back as I got older, I understood a lot of the things that had happened through the fact that he'd been very mentally ill for a good part of his life. And so it gave me an understanding that I didn't have when I was young. As he got older, he received a lot of help, and he softened, and the feelings between us became a lot more, things just evened out, and when he passed away, we were on very good terms, and I was lucky enough to have had a few discussions with him that sorted out a good deal of our past,
And there was peace in the valley as well.
Yeah, there was peace in the valley.
All right. You've mentioned her in passing, but I'd love to talk about her for a minute as your grandmother. Because she comes across in your book as being a particularly important figure to you. Why was that? What was she doing or saying or offering you that you weren't getting elsewhere?
Well, she really raised me, like I was saying, and but it was very difficult because she had a very young daughter who died in a bicycle accident at 5 years old at the gas station around the corner. So when I came along, I was the replacement child. I was the child that she'd been waiting for since the death of her daughter. So consequently, I was given enormous license to behave like a little tyrant, which I proceeded to do. And it made the rest of my life really difficult. But at the same time, I mentioned in the book, I say it ruined me and it made me simultaneously. And that I went out, as I got older, I went out seeking this very singular place that I found where I could relive the freedoms I had when I was a child. And, of course, there was no greater place than rock and roll music.
Yes.
If you're looking for license, freedom to do as you please, people are going to say yes to you all the time. It's a perfect line of work to go in, where you're going to be able to stay up till 3 a.m., sleep till 3 p.m., and so I don't think it's a coincidence that I ended up in my line of work.
Is there a direct connection then between the way the relationship between you and your grandmother and the arrival of music into your world, or you into the world of music?
My grandmother died right about the time when I was
16,
picking music up,
What were you picking up?
Just, guitar, a little few chords on the guitar. And the Castiles, my first band, we were just struggling to get some early jobs at the swimming pool or at the YMCA or wherever we could.
Who did you want to be? Who were you looking at and saying him, her?
Well, initially it was Elvis, of course.
It
was Elvis. Then later on it became, of course, the Beatles or the Stones. They were your godhead. And then later on, Dylan. So these were, you pointed at them and say, yeah, that's where I want to go. That's where I want to go. But at the same time, my ambitions were pretty modest. And at first I used to go to the school dance, wouldn't watch the lead guitarist, wouldn't watch the front man. That was already too much to ask for. I'd watch the rhythm guitar player who kind of stood back in the corner and just strummed his rhythm guitar. I said, well, I don't know if I can be a front man. I don't know if I can play lead. But I think I could do the job of the rhythm guy if I get a chance. And so I just started out not trying to hope for too much.
You were managing your expectations.
Managing my expectations. But somewhere inside of me, there was a part of me going, no, man, I want to play for all the dice. So,
or was it a confidence thing that you didn't always say, yes, I've got to be the main guy?
Yeah, I wasn't particularly confident until I had some playing under my belt.
Is that what it was, your air miles?
Once I got to the point where I realized we might have one of the best bands in town.
Yeah.
And, well, I think we're one of the best bands in the area. I'm starting to sing. I'm starting to get out front. People are applauding. They're coming regularly to see us. I'm drawing an audience. Starting to really feel myself, see who I might be able to be. And but there's always some part of you that feels like a charlatan. The part of everybody that feels like a charlatan.
Still?
Still, my
come
friend.
on.
Of course.
Really?
Because we're all made up of
insecurity.
Yeah, of insecurity. Yeah. So there's always some part of it that goes, well, I'm a complete fake, but I'm also the realest thing you've ever seen in your life. I'll be realer than you've ever imagined.
That's a whole lot of paradox.
Yeah. And the mark of an adult, or certainly of an adult artist, is be able to hold that paradox in your mind at the same time, hold those conflicts in your mind without letting them drive you crazy, and understanding that they're just a part of living.
Talk about the struggle and conquering fear and insecurity and so on. Was there a moment where it arrived, boys?
When that moment would usually hit, it was so disconcerting that I'd run the other way. In the States, we were on a magazine called Time and Newsweek at the same time. In those days, these were very prestigious news magazines that did not put entertainers on their cover very often. And I ended up on the cover of both. That should have been an I've arrived moment. But it was like, I've arrived. Let me out of here. Let me get away as quick as I can.
Were you freaked out by it?
I felt a tremendous amount of pressure, all of which I asked for, of course.
Yeah.
Right? But at the same time, I felt very ambivalent. I had a lot of ambivalence. Ambivalence has been one of the great signatures of my life. So whenever those moments would arrive, instead of being able to sit back and just enjoy it, which I have to say I probably am able to do today, but when I was younger, I was not able to do it at all.
When you write about the difficulties you had with depression and mental health in your 60s, I think a lot of people will say, well, we never saw that, and we never got any indication that this guy who we see so publicly could be going through something so deeply, profoundly, privately horrible that is shared with so many people watching this program tonight. And why did you decide not to keep that under a rock?
When you write an autobiography, you have to be willing to open up your life to a certain, if you want it to be any good. And I say in the book at the end that the deal you make with your reader is not necessarily to tell everything about yourself. I didn't tell everything about myself, but you do agree to show the reader your mind, how it works, what's had an effect upon it, how you've made the choices you've made, the things that have determined the arc of your creative life and your music. So it was a natural thing to discuss in the course of discussing those other things. That's what I felt.
You write a little bit about, and of course I'm showing local interest here, about slaying Castle in 1985.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're, or is that a smile? I'm not sure what you're doing there. Because it was a nervous, do you know what I mean? It was a nervous one for you, wasn't it?
Well, the thing with Slain, it was the first show of its kind we'd ever done.
Yeah.
I mean, I hadn't played for 90,000 people before. You know, it was the first time. So we came out, and the audience was rowdy and swaying this way and swaying that way, and people were dropping into little holes in the crowd, and all I was thinking was, somebody's going to get hurt, and it's going to be on me. It's going to be my responsibility. It really concerned me very deeply, and I had half of a nervous breakdown during the intermission, and you know, I think Pete Townsend was there. He said, "Oh yeah, that's what it's like."
You've mentioned, and I think it's probably appropriate to finish our chat with the fact that you seem to be all right now. There seems to be an equilibrium there. Is that fair to say? How are you?
I'm good. I'm good right now. Let me find some wood. Knock on it. You know, you go through your periods. You know, I had a couple rough years in my early 60s, but I've learned how to deal with it pretty well. That and the correct drugs help. You know, so. I've done all right with it. I got no complaints. Life has been good, and it couldn't have been more satisfying than the tour we did last year and coming through Dublin, and you know, those were very satisfying shows. Just very lovely. It's just deeply appreciative, and I'm blessed, you know, at this point in my life to have an audience like that, to be able to perform still to the best of our abilities. You know, to just bring more glory to our band's name, and it's a good life. I have no complaints.
It's been a pleasure having you on the Late Late Show tonight.
Much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bruce Springsteen, ladies and gentlemen. The pleasure was to talk to him. He had lovely things to say about Ireland and his fans, I have to say, off the air as well, which is great. And that's the book, which is, of course, available around the place now. Bruce Springsteen's autobiography, Born to Run, out now. Here's another chance for you at home to get your hands on tonight's big prize.